My name is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I am the daughter of the King, the one true living God, the Alpha, the Omega, our Father in heaven, and I am a forgiven sinner, washed in the blood of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
And absolutely psychotic. What is it with people being absolutely obsessed with washing things in blood and pleading blood on things and bathing in blood and touching blood? Like, why? Just leave blood out of it, please. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you're unfamiliar, then you're lucky. She spoke at this event called AFPAC, America First Political Action Conference 2022. This was February 2022 when this happened, I believe. Now, the America First movement is pretty big. It's reasonably popular. It's gotten voice from Donald Trump. So what is America First? Where did it come from? I want to tell you guys a story, so follow me through here. America First has some extremely influential actors in it today. Marjorie Taylor, the whole Freedom Caucus is kind of part of the America First movement. If not the actual party itself, the movement at the very least. I'm talking Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, Donald Trump. They're all, the Freedom Caucus, they're all America First people. They've all talked about being America First. So where did America First come from? Where did this political party start originally? Let me tell you.
Quick interjection. I won't take long. I just wanted to tell you guys, YouTube's algorithm operates off of a few factors. Watch time, whether or not you subscribe, and whether or not you like something. So if you really want to help my channel, I would appreciate it if you guys watch the video to the end. If you don't watch it to the end, just watch a little bit longer than you would have otherwise. I would appreciate that very much. All right, let's get back to the video.
It was started by this guy right here. This is Charles Lindbergh. Yes, that Charles Lindbergh. The one who, you know what? Let me just read an article about him. If you're unfamiliar, never heard of this guy, let me tell you who he is. Charles Lindbergh became an instant American hero when he piloted the Spirit of St. Louis from New York to Paris in 1927. The first person to fly solo and non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean. Charles Lindbergh was a famed pilot in the 1920s, and he started the America First movement, the America First Party. This is on NPR, by the by. I think NPR is a pretty good outlet. I'm a big fan. So let me just give you an idea of what Charles Lindbergh believed about America First. This is from April 23rd, 1941. Give you a little bit of context. Let me tell you the story that was happening in this moment in time across the world. This is Charles Lindbergh sitting here, part of the America First story, and it relates to the Nazi story. So let me tell you the Nazi story and how it relates to Lindbergh. There's a girl who is sitting there playing a board game with her family members. 8 o'clock at night when they hear a knock on the door. They open the door to find a couple of uniformed men who have a rope. And they tell you to grab onto the rope. This little girl, her brother, her cousins there, her dad, and her mom and her grandfather are all, and herself, of course, they're all there, and they're all instructed to hold on to the rope. Turns out these people, holding guns and sticking them in people's faces all the way, went door to door to find every person that they could from this specific background. They rounded them all up, and they told them to grab onto this rope, and they walked them into the forest. They gave them shovels when they got into the forest, say 100 feet in, somewhere in there. And they had them dig a big trench, say 150 people, right? All of the Jews in this little town, including that little 8-year-old girl that was playing that board game with her family, they were all digging this trench. at these uniformed officers' behest. They told them, do it or else. So you do it. You dig the hole. It's about 6 feet deep and it's 20 feet wide. They instruct your dad, your cousin, your mother, and your grandfather to stand up in front of the hole. They lift their guns. They aim for the base of the skull so that when they pull the trigger, it doesn't create a huge mess. And they pull the trigger. And you watch as your dad and grandfather and cousin and brother and your neighbors fall dead into the hole. They call for you next. And they keep doing this. They line people up along the hole that you just dug, tell you to turn around, aim at the base of the skull to prevent a huge mess, and they pull the trigger. Now, there was a rash of really, really bad aim among Nazis at the time. People's aim got so bad suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere that they were just pulling people off. They were getting them drunk, and if they still couldn't do the job, then they're just pulling them off and putting them on something else, right? They brought in people they called Hiwis, which is basically volunteers from nearby areas who were willing to line people up and pull the trigger. Now, that little girl that I described stood there and waited for her death as she stared down the hole at her father and her mother and brother and cousin and grandfather who had already been killed right in front of her. The guy that was aiming the gun at her was trying to, honestly, pull the trigger. He pulled it, and he missed. He hit her in the leg. She fell in the hole. They lined the next group up with her still alive. They pulled the trigger, and those fell on top of her. She is laying on top of the bodies of her family members. And her neighbors, her dead neighbors, fall on top of her. She's alive because of the bad aim of this Nazi soldier. This is real. This really happened. This is a real story. Okay? This is what used to happen all the time. But they discovered that people's aim was so bad because they couldn't process killing another human being. It doesn't matter how much you hate somebody. It doesn't matter how much a Trump supporter hates somebody to the left. It doesn't matter how much a Nazi hates a Jew. Human beings are not supposed to kill each other. Okay, we're not made to do that, and it fucks you up when you do it. Now, Hitler realized that, and he found what you might consider an elite group of people, elite, if you will, who could just pull the trigger all day and not care, whatever. Basically have sociopathy, what we would view now as sociopathy, just whatever. And he realized that if he really wanted to get the job done, what he needed to do was industrialize it. So instead of getting people who may or may not miss by accident, if you will, constantly, he'll pick out the ones that most definitely will not miss and don't mind this whole job at all. In fact, enjoy it maybe even. He puts them in a factory where you either work or you go to the crematorium. And they just, they put you in these chambers, they burn you up, and they move on to the next group. They put you in the chamber, they burn you up, move on to the next group. Complete sociopathy, have no connection to human emotions or feelings. That was the true horror of what was happening in Nazi Germany in 1941. Yes, throughout human history, there have been wars. There have been terrible, brutal, ugly, disgusting things that took place. Horrific things. But it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution, when we were capable of doing it on an industrial scale. Hitler's reign was the first foray into that field. He wanted to do it on an industrial scale. He didn't want to go man to man, neighborhood to neighborhood, finding people. He wanted to round them all up, bring them to camps, and do it all at once. And because of our technological advancements of the time, he succeeded. That's what was happening in 1941. April 23rd, 1941, Charles Lindbergh was aware of what was happening, fully aware of what Hitler was doing and how ugly and disturbing it truly was. He knew. By 1941, it was fully industrialized. There were trains where people were thrown in naked and the doors nailed shut until they got to Auschwitz, where they would either survive because they're strong enough to work, or they'd go to the crematorium. And Charles Lindbergh knew that full well. Despite that fact, in April 23rd, 1941, he went on air and decided to give a speech. Listen to a little bit of the speech, and it should give you some insight into where the guy's head was.
I come before you at this time to enter a plea for American independence. It is amazing that one should have to plead for American independence in a nation with a heritage such as ours.
He's, quote-unquote, pleading for American independence. Now, what's the real goal here? What did this guy want? This is him starting the America First Party, effectively. 1941. Hitler has literally industrialized. I mean, you think I've gone into detail on what happened? I haven't. There's some shit that happened in World War II that is so horrific, it will give you PTSD to know. That's how f***ed up it was. Lindbergh knew. And what's he doing right now? He's starting the America First movement. We shouldn't worry about what's happening over there in England or in Germany or anywhere else. We should worry about America. That's it. Worry about American independence. Harkens back to the founders' old principles. We want independence. We want isolationism. We want to protect our own interests and take care of ourselves and do everything that we can to improve our situation, despite the fact that he knew exactly what was happening in 1941 at that exact moment in Germany. So he continues on to tell us about American independence, and then he says this.
If need be, we are ready to die for the independence of America, as our forefathers have died before us when necessity arose.
He's creating a sense of patriotism in people and redirecting it with one intent: to prevent America from getting involved. America first. Don't go into Germany. Don't help England. Don't contribute in any way. Don't send aid. Don't send the military in. Don't send troops. Don't send blankets. Don't send food. Don't send anything. We need to think about America first. That's what he was saying. And he was using every piece of propaganda he could possibly use.
On a clearly American issue, we stand a united nation. It is only when we are asked to take part in the quarrels of foreign countries that we divide.
So, it's not our place to take part in the quarrels of foreign countries? He knew what was happening in Germany. He knew that there were boxcars full of people being shipped to death camps at that very moment when he was speaking. Right now, at this moment, he knew there were, hundreds of people stripping completely naked in these boxcars because it was so hot in them and they were on their way to their death. And he was advocating for what? To not help these people. Intentionally, specifically, to not help them. So what was the point, I hear you asking? Charles Lindbergh did this address and used propaganda from beginning to end. The point of the America First movement that he started here was to ultimately support Hitler. Charles Lindbergh didn't want America to get involved in World War II because he knew if America got involved, the U.S. was going to turn the tide of the war and Germany was going to lose. And interestingly enough, Lindbergh was quoted in September 1941, only, 6 months after this address that we're listening to right now. He was quoted as saying, "The Jews are one of the principal forces attempting to lead the U.S. into the war. The Jews' greatest danger to this country lies in their large ownership and influence in our motion pictures, our press, our radio, and our government." Of course, that's completely fabricated. There are not more Jews involved in our government or radio or press or film or whatever other nonsense. But he believed that there was more influence. So he tipped his hand in September 1941 and told us what it was really all about. He was a Nazi. He believed in the ideals of Hitler. Do you know why he gave this address despite the fact that there were literally hundreds of people digging a grave for themselves where they would then be shot in the back of the head? You know why he gave this address while that was happening? Because he supported it. Lindbergh created the America First movement to support Hitler in World War II, to prevent America from turning the tide of the war, plain and simple. That is the origin of the America First movement. That is the origin of the movement that Marjorie Taylor Greene attended. And by the way, I don't know what not the founder, but like the leader of the America First movement now of AFPAC, the actual party, Nick Fuentes, is a full-blown, self-avowed Nazi. Type of person that celebrates Hitler's birthday. And our friend Marjorie Taylor Greene here spoke at this conference, late February 2022. Now, she had to kind of back out and say, okay, maybe it wasn't the best idea to speak at that conference. Yes, I heard that Nick Fuentes said this at that time and that at this time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I apologize. Won't go to AFPAC again, my mistake. She did say that. She gave her little half-hearted apology for attending AFPAC. But she says America first, constantly. That's one of the biggest dog whistles I think that I could possibly hear. When I hear America first, I hear I support Nazis, because that's the origin of the movement. And that's the ideology of the leader of the movement now. It's the ideology of the leader then and now, both. This is the leader right here, Nick Fuentes. Who is AFPAC supporting now? Who is America First supporting now that, Nazis have unequivocally lost? Now that Hitler is dead, the U.S. did turn the tide of the war, and Nazis are viewed negatively. Who do they support now? This is the leader of the America First movement, Nick Fuentes. Late February 2022, the same conference Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke at just minutes before.
That's what we call the secret ingredient. America and the world has forgotten about them, but not us. They say about America, they say, diversity is our strength, And I look at China and I look at Russia. Can we give a round of applause for Russia? Yes.
Literally cheering for Putin immediately after he started the Ukraine war.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They don't need to support Nazis anymore because they don't really need any support because Hitler lost. Who do they support now? Putin. Plain and simple. And obviously, the America First movement, since its inception in the 1940s, has had one singular goal: to propagandistically prevent America from doing the right thing, from fighting Nazis, from fighting extremism at every turn. That's what it's all about with these people. They love the ideals that Hitler stood for, and they love the ideals that Putin stands for. Obviously. Do I need to show any more of this to back that point up? Here's where it gets really interesting. I feel I've established pretty clearly what the America First movement is, right? Do you guys remember Stephen Miller? He was in the Trump administration, worked for Donald Trump. I believe he was a speechwriter for Donald Trump. Apparently, he was a political advisor. I think he was a speechwriter too, but anyways. He was in the Trump administration. He was very close to Trump. Late June 2023, he comes out here and says this. Apparently, he's a part of a new movement. Or he's a part of a movement that he's revealing to us right now. He's probably been a part of the movement for a long time. He's just telling us.
Stephen Miller here, president of America First Legal. Today, we sent a warning.
You catch that? President of America First Legal. Isn't that interesting? Stephen Miller, president of America First Legal. So what I've learned about him with his introduction is that he is a Nazi and that he supports Putin. Plain and simple. I don't know how else to take this. How can this be any clearer? One of Donald Trump's, I think, speechwriters and political advisors is a known, self-avowed Nazi that supports Russia and wants Ukraine to fail. Okay, so let's hear the message he's got for us.
Stephen Miller here, president of America First Legal. Today, we sent a warning letter to the deans of 200 law schools around America, telling them that they must obey the Supreme Court's ruling, striking down illegal racial discrimination and affirmative action. If they try to violate, circumvent, bypass, subvert, or otherwise program around that ruling, we are going to take them to court. We are going to hold them to account.
Okay, interesting. So what I've surmised from what he just said is that he believes that affirmative action is evil, and it was just struck down by the Supreme Court, by the way. Affirmative action was. If you don't know what affirmative action was, let me just give you a real basic, bare-bones explanation. The black community makes up about 14% of the United States, right? But they make up, I don't know, less than 1% of Harvard admissions, for example. Why is that? There are perfectly qualified black applicants who apply to Harvard University. Hell, they're in some cases even more qualified than some of the other applicants. But the other applicants, the white ones, they're going to get it because their legacy. Because their dad went to Harvard and wrote him a recommendation letter. There are more qualified black applicants than white applicants in some cases. And instead of hiring the black applicant, we have data. It's been shown through scientific studies, which I'll pop up on screen, that names that sound more black are less likely to get hired for a position or to get chosen as an applicant or whatever else. So affirmative action set out to correct that imbalance. Affirmative action says, all other things being equal, assuming the black person and the white person are of the same education, the same training, the same everything, all things being equal, lean toward trying to equal it out so that you have a roughly equivalent number of like black people in your population as we do in the rest of society. That was the claim. If somebody is more qualified, hire the more qualified person. But if it's between a number of different people and the, qualifications vary and everything else, lean toward making it roughly representative of society. That's it. That's what affirmative action was. That's what the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, struck down. Interestingly enough, the KKK has been fighting against affirmative action with the exact same arguments used by the Supreme Court to strike it down since at least 1982. This is an interview with a KKK Grand Wizard, the top guy, the dude that ran the entire organization in 1982. Came on to complain about affirmative action.
We feel that affirmative action is discriminating against white people, and there is no question about it. Two wrongs don't make a right. Because black people were hurt and discriminated against in the past does not justify the discrimination against white people now.
Okay, affirmative action does not discriminate against white people. Affirmative action says the most qualified applicant gets the job, period. But all other things being equal, try to make your percentages roughly match society, all other things being equal. That's it. But the KKK leader couched it as white people being persecuted, of course, because that's what it's all about for him. That's all he cares about, white people being persecuted.
When I introduced you, I didn't say that your organization was. I said historically to most Americans, you're anti-Catholic and anti-Semitic and racist. In other words, anti-black. You said, we're not anti-Catholic.
Right.
We're not anti-Semitic. You didn't deny the racist thing.
Well, it depends on your definition of racist. I'm a segregationist, okay? I believe...
Depends on your definition of racist, he says. I'm a segregationist. No, it doesn't depend on your definition of racist. You're racist. That's plain and simple. I mean, how else am I supposed to take this? You're racist.
I'm a segregationist, okay? I believe that God has commanded me not to mix with other races.
Right.
For that reason, I want to have schools where I can send my children to a white school. I want to be able to go to my white neighborhoods, to white businesses, for those things. So if that terms me as a racist, then I'm a racist.
Then you're a racist. Okay, then we've all come to the same conclusion. Fantastic. Now, I just want to point something out. Donald Trump's political advisor has come out against affirmative action, as have basically every other conservative in the United States, exactly the same way that the KKK did, all the way back in 1982. And I feel I've strongly drawn a link between Donald Trump's campaign and staff members and the Nazi Party. Have I not, drawn that link for everybody clearly enough? I'm pretty comfortable with it. That's the origin of the America First Party. That's the origin of affirmative action. That's who's been fighting it this entire time. People on the right, conservatives, have been stifling progress every step of the way. We've been trying to move forward and improve the situation that we're in, expand rights for people, and at every turn, there's the right, there's the KKK, there's the Nazi Party, there's America First, there's the church, the evangelical or Catholic Church standing in the way. Every time. Is it really any surprise that Trump and all of his political advisors and staff members and everything else are all linked to a party that is well known, that was started to support the Nazis and now supports Putin? Is it any surprise? I hope I've drawn these links clearly enough for you, because a lot of people are completely unaware of these connections. But I know there are going to be people out there that are still going to argue with me in the comments. Let me know.